So two economists meet on the street and one asks, "How's your mother?" And the other says, "Relative to what?" What's the point of astrology? To make us economists look good. When an economist says the evidence looks mixed, that means the theory says one thing and the data says the opposite. And that one was from Richard Thaler, he told me that one. He's the president of the American Economics Association, of course. An economist is someone who doesn't quite have enough personality to become an accountant. That one's particularly cruel. It's also directed at me because, yes, I'm a big bad journalist, but I am also a qualified economist, one of the very few qualified economists who write regularly in the media, in the mainstream media. Being an economist means I'm an expert who doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I like to make everyone else feel as if that's their fault. That's what one of our critics said to me quite recently. That wasn't Michael Gove, by the way. More of him later, perhaps, or perhaps not. Joking aside, I care about economics very much. That's why I try and write and broadcast to a large audience about economics. I've worked for The Economist, the Financial Times. For a decade, I was on Channel 4 News as the economics correspondent. You tried doing economics in the madness that is a daily television newsroom. For 15 years, I've written the economics agenda in the Sunday Telegraph every week, 52 weeks a year. I try to stay in touch with my friends and colleagues in academic economics, reading journals, attending conferences. I'm on the advisory board of CAGE at Warwick, one of my former universities, though I'm an independent advisory member. I say that just to reassure Nick. I've also been involved over the years with helping the ESRC under various guises, and they funded my postgraduate research. So before I talk about Article 50 and Brexit, I'd say I see a great deal of good work going on in our universities and of course here at the National Institute. That's despite the criticism thrown at our subject, often unfairly, as Tony said. This is a great time to be an economist. The tectonic shape plates of policy are shifting. Global trade is moving, not only in the aftermath of recent electoral surprises, which are on all our minds, but the more general long-term shift of economic gravity from the big Western economies to the rest of the world, not least Asia. I'm very happy to see that economics is now combining with other disciplines more and more, anthropology, geography. When I did my degrees back in the late 80s and early 90s, our subject was imperialistic, like a sort of intellectual Death Star. No other discipline had anything of value to contribute. It's great to see now psychology, history, getting a proper look in to economics. Fantastic. And the research proposals that I look at, it's exciting to see economists getting to grips with psephology, with rapid technological change, in a broader sense with big data. And I tip my hat to all of that. In general, though, I think economics, and I say this from the media front line, needs to be a bit more courageous sometimes. Economists need to be a bit more willing to say in public what they often say to me in private as a trusted friend and interlocutor. Going against conventional wisdom, if you're an economist, shouldn't be seen, it shouldn't immediately be a badge of honour. We shouldn't invite contrarianism for its own sake. But if you've got an argument, it makes sense, you've got evidence, sticking your head above the parapet shouldn't be seen what it currently too often is. Dangerous, unwise, career suicide. I'm not here to defend Ruth Lee or anyone else, but I would say, with all respect, that few aspects of human behaviour are more damaging than groupthink. And groupthink is something that our leading economists, I'm not accusing them of it, but they should be constantly guarding against it, attempting constantly to disrupt groupthink, if that's where the evidence leads us. Groupthink should be something which the economics profession dismantles rather than reinforces. So often, large economic questions are posed, and they're so high profile, so interesting, so relevant, so newsworthy, that the profession, I'm afraid, sometimes seems to choose to say nothing at all. Take the decision to build another runway at Heathrow, a third runway. rather than expanding a smaller airport, say like Gatwick, or God forbid, really expanding a regional airport like Birmingham or Manchester, creating another growth centre, an alternative to London and the South East. Spend 30 seconds Googling and you'll see Britain's Supreme Court's already ruled air pollution around Heathrow breaches legal limits. To add another 250,000 flights to the present 500,000 with all the extra related road traffic makes a nonsense of our anti-pollution legislation. The case for Heathrow apparently hinges on hub status, yet over 4/5 of those flying into the capital is as their final destination. A third Heathrow runway is estimated to cost 18 billion, given extensive home demolition required, far more than any other site, and the payments that entails. It's great for the lawyers, all the legal wrangling and compensation, but it will ultimately be ghastly for taxpayers. And that doesn't include the countless billions that will be spent diverting existing roads, maybe even the M25 we learnt once the decision had been made. And as the true complexity of Heathrow becomes clear, ladies and gentlemen, even Howard Davis is now distancing himself from his own report that the government used as its justification to succumb to the massive lobbying effort. We desperately need, in a case like that, say, genuine economic experts to enter the debate, not party pre, not paid by any particular side, that just have tenure at our top universities. Yet so often the economics profession, it seems to me, is too shy to come forward. It's the same with HS2, which, as we just heard, could be the second worst infrastructure project the government has backed since the Second World War. Maybe even the first. I wonder what is the first. I wonder what... Again, there is a conventional wisdom, of course, promoted by Whitehall and endlessly well-paid consultants, that HS2 is the way to go. It might be. But surely, it seems to me, we'd get more bang for our buck investing in lower-profile commuter lines around Bristol, Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, London. They're places where people so often struggle to get to work. Wouldn't that do more for our productivity and regional policy than making the journey time from London to Birmingham a bit shorter, turning Sutton Coldfield into a commuter suburb of the capital? Again, I'd say it's a decent question. I guess it's a decent question, and I'd really like to see some genuinely independent economists asking it. Then there's QE, the biggest monetary experiment of all time. What are the long-term allocative implications? What are the short-term prospects for unwinding? The conventional wisdom, of course, is that everything will be okay. And it might be. Maybe we can go on expanding central bank balance sheets forever. I don't know. But again, I'd like to see some demonstrably expert, yet undoubtedly independent, not linked to central bank analysis.
Read my blog.
Again, almost...
Or mine.
Indeed. Again, almost all academic research, though, on monetary policy tends to steer away from asking the really tough questions. And so we come to Brexit. So, strike me down. I eventually decided to vote for Brexit once the then Prime Minister came back from his negotiation with, in my view, very little. And I guess that pits me against most of you. But that's probably what happened back in the late 90s and early 2000s when I wrote many columns saying that the UK shouldn't join the single currency. And I wonder if any of you have changed your mind about that. However any of us voted, and I expect most of us in this room voted Remain, as most economists did overwhelmingly, it strikes me that we all have a duty to say what we know, but also, crucially, to not say what we don't really know. So we had our exhaustive 400-page Treasury report that said straight after the vote there would be an immediate and profound economic shock, a soundbite, of course, repeated verbatim by the Chancellor over many, many news cycles. That isn't what's happened. Does that mean the economy's out of the woods? Of course not. Does that mean there's still huge economic uncertainty about Brexit? Absolutely. Does it mean that we as economists should all be slightly more willing to question conventional wisdom? I'd say that it does. Economists often say that leaving the EU will lead axiomatically to a reduction in FDI. It might not. What I'd say is that even without the tax cuts and deregulation, which some say will accompany Brexit, I'm not so sure, again, the big technology firms are still piling into the UK. Apple, Google, Facebook, they've unveiled plans for further expansion, consolidating us as Europe's main tech hub, even after the vote. No one serious still insists Brexit will harm London's position as a global financial capital. Many former Remainers are now saying the opposite. Dyson's just unveiled plans for a new Wiltshire campus employing thousands more engineers and scientists. Boeing's just announced Britain will host its first European factory, as we heard earlier. During this Article 50 negotiation, there will be a propaganda war. There remain a number of politicians and peers determined to reverse this Brexit vote, an outcome I believe wouldn't only be undemocratic, but also would seriously scupper our negotiating hand, but more definitely prolong uncertainty relating to our EU status. Now that definitely would upset the FDI. It could also hammer our credit rating, by the way, and cause a genuine sterling crisis. It's a great time to be an economist. The challenges are massive. The level of public interest in economic issues, should we choose to meet that public interest, and I fully endorse Francis's view about trying to make economics more user-friendly, is huge. During Article 50, highly technical discussions will be conducted in a cauldron of public opinion. Political careers will be created and wrecked. Tempers will be lost. The black arts of spin and ad hominem attacks will come to the fore. During that time, economists, all of us, will be under intense scrutiny. We should say what we know for sure and admit openly when we're uncertain. We should definitely call out what is demonstrably factually incorrect, but realise there are more than one way of doing things, not allowing the best always to be the enemy of the good. We should lay out a range of feasible options rather than resorting to our own personal dogma. We should sometimes agree to disagree, even among friends, not just rushing to condemn when our particular solution hasn't been adopted. Above all, we should realise that ordinary punters running businesses, paying mortgages, meeting payroll month in, month out, often have a better feel for economic reality, sometimes even than we experts. Finally, economics, while factually based, is of course a social science. It's inevitable that smart people will sometimes, they should, end up agreeing to disagree. Above all, fellow economists shouldn't jump to assume bad faith and take offence when dealing with those who come to a different conclusion. At a time when economists are under intense scrutiny, as we all will be during the Article 50 process, that would do our subject serious damage. Thank you.